All right, here's good advice for not being frustrated as a parent. Obviously, if your son, if you know wrestling, maybe you've been around it for years, or were a high school wrestler, or even college, that's a little bit easier. But if we're new to wrestling, and now your son's on the mats, the best things you can do is this. Number one, get a program or some good coaching. And sometimes the best teams, especially in youth, are just the big teams that have 120 kids on the team. Those aren't always the best as far as the coaching. So even if you have to hire a great high school coach or a great high school kid to help your son on the side, I mean, anything it takes, just to make sure that they have the tools. Because if you don't have the tools, the raw sports like track, baseball, once you learn how to hit the baseball and the technique for catching and throwing, it's a lot of athleticism. Wrestling is a lot of technique and skill and drill time. And the raw sports, you can be born great at those sports. I think even in football, they'll go months without even touching a football because they just, footwork drills and weight room is pretty much off season for football. Well, wrestling, gymnastics, they're skill sports. So make sure you have a good program or a good coach. Make sure your son's on a good drill plan. There's literally thousands of wrestling techniques, and you want to understand that. Adopt the under-teach, over-drill approach because the foundation of wrestling skills are vital, and everything else is built on that. So if you could, even if you have to get a home mat and some good wrestling DVDs to follow, learn on your own with your son. If your son's new to wrestling and so are you, you guys can learn together and just say, okay, here's the core positions in wrestling, a few leg attacks, a few ways to score from a front headlock, a few things on bottom. Write them all out and drill those. Get a home mat and get your good instructional wrestling videos. Tape that drill plan to the wall and drill that 3 times a week right after school, let's say for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, just little by little. And your son's going to start winning very quickly if he has the skills. Another thing is, let the losses roll off your back. Just attack one thing. Every week you watch the matches. Some people say we don't lose, we learn. That's a pretty good advice. That way you're attacking the improvement of the sport with intellect and not emotion. Too often people react emotionally when their son loses in wrestling. They should not. So look at it from an intellectual standpoint. And it might be a nerves thing. Maybe they're not, holding position. Maybe they're giving up too many points. Maybe it is a technique issue. Maybe it's a strength issue. Maybe it's maturity and you can't do anything about it. If your 13-year-old looks like an 8-year-old and he's 20 pounds overweight, he might be 6'6", 240 in 3 years. But for right now, he's wrestling kids who have the bodies of 16-year-olds. He's not going to win. So if it's a maturity thing that is out of your control, sit him down, explain to him that, we have to wait a year or two until, the maturity strikes. But just realize where you're at, set a goal to get to from point A to point B, attack it every week, write down the number 1 or 2 things they need to do, spend some time, even if it's just 15 minutes 3 times a week. The next tournament, you're going to see improvement. And the main thing about not getting emotional about wins and loses is you don't induce panic. If you act nervous and scared or mad or upset or, you're just going to make your son or daughter panic over the sport of wrestling. And you want them to be calm, smart, wrestling controlled but tough, and just holding position, try to score points. We have a saying, take what he gives you. I'm going to take what the guy gives me. It's very simple. A lot of stuff on the college coaches, and even some TV commercials, they talk about imposing your will on your opponent and all that. I don't know about all that. I think there's probably a handful of wrestlers who wrestle that way, but 90% of the best wrestlers in America and in the world are more technical, and they're controlled, they hold position, and they're just hard to beat and they score points. The beat 'em up tough guy wrestling, that is fantastic, especially if you're a power wrestler and a power kid. But most of us don't have that type of a personality. We don't have we're not one of the top 1% strongest men in America. So the whole push them around, make them tired, impose your will type wrestling, I think, is for a very few people. Probably 90+% of us are better off just approaching wrestling as a tactical, technical position sport, and certainly mental toughness and working hard and being in shape are parts of all sports. But kind of approach it from that standpoint. Find one thing every week to fix and fix it. And as I said, if you get a home mat workout partner, maybe someone comes over and helps your son, or you can just meet 30 minutes before practice. Tape the 6 moves that you're going to drill this week. Drill those over and over. Then, the next practice, have the next one. Flip the card over, tape it to the wall, drill those. Then do the practice. Then the next practice, or before the match, the tournament on the weekend, get there early. Drill all 12 or 15. You might just have, 5, 10, 15 techniques that you're working on that you feel like these are what my son needs or daughter needs to perfect, and just keep revolving, rotating through those drills, and you're going to see tremendous results. But the main thing is to get a system. And, we obviously have more information at purlerwrestling.com. Hit subscribe if you're interested in seeing more of these videos, and we appreciate the interest.